Students complete the ACBT University Entry Foundation in 8 months for 288,000 rupees.
Another step forward was announced in the COVID-19 vaccination drive here in Sri Lanka. A very good evening and welcome to Primetime News on TV1. We've got details of that story and much more lined up for you here tonight. But first, a look at your top stories.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
Two journalists share the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. Pfizer vaccine to be administered to 18 and 19-year-old students from the 21st of this month. Control prices removed. Suppliers call for price hike. Will the import restriction on chemical fertilizer be relaxed? Anura Kumara reveals more links in Pandora Papers with former Deputy Minister Nirupama Rajapaksa and her husband. Fire in Ragala Estate claims 5 lives of the same family.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
State Minister of Women and Child Development P.L. Nishantha attended an event in Kilinochchi along with Kumaran Padmanathan alias KP. KP was once a top-tier leader of the LTTE and was in charge of international relations of the organization.
It was organized at the Senchole Children's Home in Kilinochchi for Children's Day. State Minister P.L. Nishantha and Kumaran Padmanathan had attended the event.
The President had recently invited the Tamil diaspora for discussions. What do you have to say about that?
This shows that the President is far-sighted. No matter what issues crop up, we need to hold discussions and resolve them. The President has extended his hands. Everything will not become successful at once. We need to do this step by step. We need to do this for the present generation of our country. We should not miss this opportunity. The President has a 2/3 majority. I would like to point out to our leaders and people that this power must be used properly.
It was reported that you were in possession of the assets of the LTTE during the final stages of the war. What happened to those assets?
During the final stages of the war, I was hiding in Malaysia. I was not given any assets. I was only given money for my daily expenses. If I had assets like that, I would have saved our people. Nobody knows what kind of assets that they left back. So I believe that it is better to stop this now.
A decision was reached at the meeting of the COVID-19 Prevention Committee to vaccinate the youth aged 18 and 19 from the 21st of this month. The meeting was chaired by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today.
The meeting of the COVID-19 Prevention Committee was held online today. Our objective should be to vaccinate as many people as possible. Take all steps necessary to do that. Always have a doctor present when children aged 18 and 19 are vaccinated. It is better if the students can be vaccinated at their respective schools. The COVID-19 Prevention Committee also decided to continue the inter-provincial travel restrictions until the 21st of this month. The President's Media Division said at the meeting it was revealed that 100% of the population above the age of 60 and 98% of the population above the age of 30 have been vaccinated. The President had said that the vaccination program of people between 20 and 30 years to be expedited. From Thursday, the 21st of October, children aged 18 and 19 will be vaccinated at the respective schools that they attend. That was the advice of the President. Accordingly, the vaccination of students in this age group will begin from the 21st of October. If any student has already left school and is aged 18 or 19, we have been advised to vaccinate them at the office of the MOH or hospitals in their respective localities.
Journalists Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov have won the Nobel Peace Prize for their courageous fight to defend freedom of expression in the Philippines and Russia.
The committee called the pair quote-unquote representatives of all journalists who stand up for this ideal. The winners of the prestigious prize worth $1.1 million were announced at the Norwegian Nobel Institute in Oslo.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2021 to Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov for their efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace.
They were chosen out of 329 candidates. Ressa, who co-founded the news site Rappler, was of violence and growing authoritarianism in her native country, the Philippines. It is one of the few Philippine media organizations to be openly critical of President Rodrigo Duterte and his policies. Muratov, who co-founded the independent newspaper Novaj Gazeta and had been its editor-in-chief for 24 years, had for decades defended freedom of speech in Russia under increasingly challenging conditions. Published 3 times a week, it regularly runs investigations into alleged corruption and other malpractices in ruling circles and highlights the plight of people it considers victims of the official abuse. The editor was congratulated by Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, who said, quote-unquote, he persistently works in accordance with his own ideals. He is devoted to them. He is talented. He is brave.
Coming back to some news from here at home, importers of gas, milk powder, wheat flour and cement, of which the control prices were recently removed, demanded for a price increase today.
Importers continue to demand a price increase by visiting the Consumer Affairs Authority today. Accordingly, wheat flour importers demanded a price increase of around 15 to 20 rupees per kilogram. The importers also demanded a price increase of 350 rupees per kilogram of milk powder and a price increase of 500 rupees for a domestic gas cylinder. They demanded a price increase of 200 rupees for a 50 kilogram cement sack.
Although the price control on goods was removed, arrangements have been made to allow these companies to sell their goods to the market after incurring a substantial profit. However, if certain companies sell their goods at unreasonable prices by exploiting their customers, then the Consumer Affairs Authority will take action against this. This is how we are planning on controlling the unfair prices charged through this Gazette notification.
While discussions on the increase in prices of milk powder continue, people lined up in long queues were at the Narayanpet Economic Zone to purchase milk powder.
Our
We have suffered like this before. We stood in queues to purchase bread during Sirimavo's reign. Now we have to stand in line to purchase milk powder. Our country had to function like this at a time when travel restrictions were imposed across the world. The prices of goods increased exponentially. The price of gas alone increased by 130% in a week. If the income the government receives is 1,263 and 1,050 of that is spent for the payment of salaries and pensions of state sector employees, how can we pay the premiums of the loans that we obtained with the remaining 163? We had to pay about 908 billion that year alone. How can we bear the cost of development? When the income of the tourism industry slumps, containers will get stuck at the port. We cannot print dollars. There is a foreign revenue crisis. There is only one solution to that. We need to increase our exports. We don't have too many other things to sell off. The biggest asset, which was the Hambantota port, was already sold.
While Minister Bandhu Gunawardena explained the reasons for the increase in prices of goods, the former executive director of the Consumer Affairs Authority was summoned to the CID today. He was summoned to record a statement over the investigations into the garlic scam. I informed the CID that not only garlic but even black gram was smuggled just like this. I asked them to look into black gram, lentils and milk powder that was taken out the same way. If all of this is just covered up with only the garlic scam, all the other thieves will get away. We didn't come here to do this. We came here to implement the vistas of prosperity. If this is not happening and instead there is corruption, I decided not to be involved in this anymore. That is why I resigned. Although the Consumer Affairs Authority is a regulatory body, the issue here is that no one listens to them. These issues cropped up since the day people like Bandhu Gunawardena came in. If people like them think that we are bound to do what he wants, that will not happen. The remaining gazettes will also have to be rescinded as they are not practical. This is what happens when things are done according to the whims and fancies of certain individuals. The Consumer Affairs Authority serves no purpose anymore. If the authority is closed down, at least the government will be able to save some money. What is the point in having a Consumer Affairs Authority if Nothing is being done. Sri Lanka has printed more than 106 billion rupees during the first week of this month. According to the central bank data, the 106 billion rupees printed for this month brings the total treasury bill stock held by the central bank to 1,442 billion rupees or 1.4 trillion rupees. Since the beginning of 2021, the government has printed more than 700 billion rupees. In a tweet, the former deputy governor of the central bank, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena, said, with usable foreign exchange reserves falling to $2.1 billion at the end of September, and with the bonus of special drawings rights allocation gone, unless expected flows by central bank governor Ajit Nivad Cabral is received in the next few months, the central bank will be unable to keep the rupee rate at 203 against the US dollar. What happens when you excessively print money?
When you print money and if you distribute it among the people, the first step would be that money will chase behind imports. For an example, if you print money and give it to people, most likely they will buy a gas cylinder, or they will buy sprats, they will buy lentils. Basically, in the first round, the consumer will go and give the money to the shop owner, and they will get the goods. In the second round, the shop owner will give the same money to the wholesaler and get the necessary goods. On the third round, the wholesaler will give it to the importer, and it will increase the pressure more on imports. There's a kind of a misperception in my humble view that people think higher imports are the problem for shortage of dollars. Of course, higher imports are the problem, but we have to see what is the reason for higher imports.
How does this affect the foreign exchange reserves in the country?
Basically, when people buy too much imports, then there will be higher demand for dollars from the importers. So at that point, the central bank has to sell their dollars to the market to keep the exchange rate stable. So at that point, their reserves start diluting. In the economic terms, when you have excess liquidity, you will have pressure on the dollars because there will be higher demand for dollars for imports, and that will finally end up in a balance of payment crisis. There's another reason, that is we have a price control on dollar. So when you have a price control on dollar at 203, basically the suppliers of dollars, mainly the exporters and the people who send their remittances to Sri Lanka, they really do not have an incentive to send the dollars at a lower rate. They can get about 230 rupees at the curb market. So they prefer sending dollars into the curb market and get a higher value, or they hoard the dollars with them till they expect a change in the exchange rate. When you have higher demand for the dollars, the central bank has to basically supply that dollars from the reserves.
Amidst discussions on the increase of fuel prices, money printing and proposals to obtain a loan of $2.5 billion on a 7% interest, corrupt deals have also come back into the limelight. The discussion around large-scale corruption gained new ground with the release of the Pandora Papers by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Leader of the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, Anura Kumara Disanayaka, made a revelation on corrupt deals in Parliament today.
The
Ginnilwala proposed scheme. On the 6th of January 2015, that company was paid a sum of 4,011 million rupees. This is the CAMC Engineering Company in China. This company had deposited money in the accounts of the company Red Root Investments. That company is owned by Thirunadeshan. This company deposited $5.9 million to the account of Thirunadeshan in Hong Kong. Afterwards, Thirunadeshan purchased a plot of land there. Thirunadeshan spent 64 million rupees to purchase 17 acres of a coconut plantation. Thirunadeshan has an account at the nation's trust bank in Cinnamon Gardens. The amount is paid by this bank account, and the money was deposited in the bank account by the company Red Root International through the company's bank account in Hong Kong. Money was deposited in the Hong Kong bank account by the account of the Ginnilwala scheme.
අර ගින්නිල්වල යෝජනා ක්‍රමේ ගිණුමෙන් සල්ලි දිනවා.
ඔය කලින් කියපු කාරණාව අධිකරණයේ දැනට නඩුවක් පවතිනව නේද?
මල්වාන් ඉඩම ගැන තියෙනවා. ඔව්. බැසිල් රාජපක්ෂ මුදල් අමාත්‍යවරයාත් වගේ උත්තරේ කරතු නඩුවක් තියෙනවා.
ඒ අධිකරණයේ තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නයක්නේ. තාම ඒක හරිද වැරදිද මොකද්ද කියලා අධිකරණයට භාජනය වී තිබෙන හරි නෑ කියලා මම හිතනවා.
ඒක හොඳයි.
ඕනෑම රටේ පුද්ගලයෙක් සම්බන්ධව.
ඔව්. මේක ගරු මන්ත්‍රීතුමා කතා කරන එක හරි නෑ තමයි. හැබැයි ඊට වඩා හරි නෑ නේද මේ වගේ වැඩ? නෑ මම අහන්නේ
Speaking about these things might be bad, but doing these kind of things is worse, right? It is worse, isn't it? The Ginnilwala scheme had transferred 4,011 million rupees to another company just 2 days before the presidential election. Then that money is transferred to Thirunadeshan's account in Hong Kong, and then houses are purchased using that money.
ඒ කවුන්ට් වලින් සල්ලි එනවා මෙහෙට ඒ සල්ලි වලින් ගෙවල්
සම්පූර්ණයෙන් වැරදි මේ අධිකරණයේ දැනට පවතින නඩුවක් ඕක කතා කරන්න එපා මොකද ඒකට පෙනී ඉන්න නීතිඥවරයෙක් මම මේ කරුණාකර දැන් ඔබතුමා ඔහොම කියනකොට තිරුණඩේසන් ගැන තිරුණඩේසන් වෙනුවෙන් පෙනී ඉන්න කිසිම කෙනෙක් මෙතන නැහැ එතුමා විත්තිකාරයෙක්ගේ නඩුවේ මේක අසාධාරණයි කරුණාකර ඔක නවත්තන්න
හරිද කෙලින් කියන්න බෑ ගරු මන්ත්‍රීතුමා හැබැයි බොහෝ අය ඉන්නවා තිරුණඩේසන් ගැන මට පේන විදියට හරිද කවුද ලේකම්තුමාද කතා කරන්නේ
Is it the secretary speaking? I will speak about the secretary in the next chapter. That chapter is not big enough yet. The details are being collected. Many people say that although I make these revelations, nothing has really happened. I know that. What happens is the truth is hidden and the corrupt are acquitted. The Prime Minister here, in the year 2015, the company China Harbour had spent $7.6 million on your election campaign. I have presented this along with the checks that were issued. I would like to know why China Harbour would fund a single candidate at the presidential election of the country. Also, CICT donated 19.5 million to the Pushpa Rajapaksa Foundation. Then we allowed them to develop the southern container terminal. Now we are going to give them 13 acres of land in the harbour. Any person with common sense would understand that there is a connection between the money that was given and these deals. There is a dark financial story to our country that is not reflected in the financial reports of the country. I believe that it is
politicians who are involved in this large-scale corruption and fraud who are responsible for the economic crisis in our country.
උදව් දෙන උපකාර කරන දේශපාලන කියලා මම විශ්වාස කරනවා. අනුකුමාර දිසානායක මැතිතුමා දූෂණ වංචා ගැන කතා කරා.
MP Andrukumara Dissanayake is talking about fraud and corruption. If someone had committed a crime, they must be punished. But Andrukumara Dissanayake spoke about all of this corruption and fraud that happened before 2015. After the government of good governance was established in 2015, the FCID was established. And since he was in the anti-corruption camp, why couldn't you solve these cases of corruption?
The husband of former Deputy Minister Nirupama Rajapaksa was summoned to the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery and corruption to make a statement regarding the leaked Pandora papers. This is with regard to an investigation that was ordered by the President. He left the premises after providing a statement for around 2 hours. Meanwhile, Transparency International Sri Lanka filed a complaint with the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery and corruption, calling for an investigation into the alleged unexplained assets of the former Deputy Minister Nirupama Rajapaksa and her husband T. Nadesan. The TISL points out that serious concerns have been raised as to how the former Deputy Minister and her spouse, who has been identified as a politically exposed person, amassed such a wealth. TISL noted that the transactions revealed through this expose could amount to offences under Section 23A of the Bribery Act and requested the Commission to probe into the declarations of assets and liabilities of former Deputy Minister Nirupama Rajapaksa relating to her tenure as a Member of Parliament. Furthermore, TISL requested that investigations could be pursued under Section 70 of the Bribery Act to investigate whether public funds have been embezzled and laundered to these foreign safe havens. When Nirupama Rajapaksa's name was disclosed, people started talking about Thirukumaran Nadesan more than Nirupama. These allegations were clearly levelled against Nirupama Rajapaksa. You and I and this entire country are well aware that she is a close relative of the Rajapaksa family. An investigation must be carried out on her. If her husband is involved, then an investigation regarding him must be carried out as well. We can see that people have been talking about Thirukumar Nadesan more than of Nirupama Rajapaksa. We are waiting to see how this investigation is carried out.
Several trade unions staged protests today and warned of further trade union action in the future. We'll bring you the details after this short commercial break.
TV1 News First, main sponsor.
Students complete the ACBT University Entry Foundation in 8 months for 288,000 rupees.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
Bellboy's got you covered. Download Bellboy today to get all your household appliance fixing and repairs done. Now available on Android and iOS.
Welcome back to the news. 44 health trade unions launched a strike action for 5 hours this morning, citing that authorities have turned a blind eye to their issues.
Health officials stepped down from their duties for 5 hours this morning and staged demonstrations opposite hospitals across the country during their lunch hour. According to the co-convener of the Health Trade Unions Collective, Saman Ratnapriya, 16 hospitals, including hospitals treating COVID-19 patients, children's hospitals and cancer hospitals, were not affected by this trade union action. As of now, 14 health workers have succumbed to the COVID-19 pandemic, but their pensions have not been paid by the Ministry of Health or the government. The government just sugarcoats these frontline health workers and uses them without rewarding them. Nurses in the Western Province only get paid for 80 hours of work. They work overtime for about 200 hours. These are the repercussions of the wrong decisions taken by the health authorities. There is a shortage of junior staff of about 7,000. There is a shortage of about 12,000 nurses as well. The Ministry of Health has not taken any steps to fill that void. We are attempting to grab the attention of the authorities by not inconveniencing the general public. But if they do not turn their eye towards us, we will have to take the next step. We will have to resort to strikes. if they do not direct their attention towards our issues. The Government Medical Officers Association is also gearing up for a token strike. Transfer lists were always issued a year late. Even last year, the transfer list was 1 year late. This is the circular for the next year, 2022. In these 3 circulars for next year, the mechanism to select doctors is mentioned in 3.
Once again, when this happened, the general public warned the teachers to suspend these demonstrations. If this happens again, and if the people start throwing eggs and tomatoes at the teachers, they will completely lose the respect they have for themselves. We are well aware of the fact that leaders of this country would like it if the future generations of the country end up uneducated. Senior ministers initially said that they were scoundrels and a waste of time. Today, it has come to a point where even henchmen of provincial councillors are also criticizing the teachers. The Teachers' Principals Trade Union Alliance has decided today, if you are going to reopen schools on the 21st, fulfill our requests immediately. Ministers, didn't you notice that through the past 89 days, we participated in every discussion that was scheduled? We were not only flexible enough to participate in these discussions, we also proposed our suggestions to you. But your leaders completely disregarded them. Arrange a meeting so we can all sit at one table and come to a conclusion. We care about the children of this country, although the leaders don't.
Farmers across the island are still awaiting a definitive decision on whether or not they will receive the fertilizer that they need before they begin their cultivations for the Maha season.
Media coverage of the Maha season meeting of the Min Area Agrarian Settlement in Polonnaruwa was limited. Here are the views expressed by the farmers following the meeting that lasted for about 2 hours.
We must be provided with at least 50% of chemical fertilizer by the 20th of this month. If the government is giving us liquid fertilizer, that too must be provided before the 20th. It is only then the Min Area settlement will decide if we are going to cultivate this season or not. No farmers have produced organic fertilizer according to the statistics that are being presented. These people have no information. State sector officials have no answers. All we can say is that even if we die, they will get their vehicles and live their lives.
The meeting at the Sandampura Mahavali office in Dehiyattakandiya was also held today.
Meanwhile, farmers in Mahauswava Arnamaduwa staged a protest demanding solutions for the fertilizer crisis. Opposition leader Sajit Premadasa arrived at the location.
අපි ගොයියෝ ආසරණය කරනවනේ කරන්නේ සර් මේ 69 ලක්ෂයක ඡන්දයක් දුන්නු එක මිනිස්සෙක් හොයා ගන්න බෑ ඒතර මුංග කොන්ද පාන තියනවා නම් කොහෙවත් නේද මිනිස්සු හාල් පාලනය කරන්න දෙනවා අන්න රැස්යෙන් කියන්න ගොවියන්ට එන්න කියන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝ ටික එකතු වෙලා සාකච්ඡා කරලා ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඕන විදිහට තමයි තීරණය කරන්නේ
මේ රටේ මිනිස්සු කියනවා නම් අඩියක් පස්සට ගන්නයි කියලා.
If the people of this country want to take a step back, that should be done. The president has invited the opposition leader and members of the Samagijana Balawega for discussions. We will explain your woes during the discussion. Ministers and MPs were appointed after 6.9 million people voted for this government. However, they do not have the backbone to speak up.
මන්ත්‍රීවරු මැති ඇමතිවරු ආණ්ඩුව නියෝජනය කරමින් ඒගොල්ලන්ට කොන්දක් නැහැ කතා කරන්න.
Agriculture is an important sector. How should decisions regarding this important sector be taken? When Minister Johnston went to Polgahavela, the development committee met there. Do you remember? I have got a voice recording of the discussions. They kept on asking whether the fertilizer be given. Why aren't you doing this? I felt how uncomfortable you were in that voice recording. I have no issue regarding that voice recording. That was an open meeting. I was not uncomfortable at any point of time. I said that since it was the vistas of prosperity of our president that emerged victorious, and it was said in that policy statement that such decisions will be taken for 10 years. But as a president who does not like to see the people of this country die, he took a decision immediately. We said that we will stand with him and support him fully. If something goes wrong, we said that we will not hesitate to reverse this decision. That is what I am saying today as well. So we are not helpless.
Moving on to some amendments in the guidelines that have been issued when Sri Lankans travel back into Sri Lanka. The country now has removed a restriction on the number of unvaccinated passengers that airlines can carry.
According to the Civil Aviation Authority, the 75 passengers limit imposed on aircraft carrying unvaccinated passengers has been lifted from now on. Sri Lanka is fully open for vaccinated tourists and other vaccinated inbound passengers at the moment, but unvaccinated passengers must undergo a 14-day quarantine. Meanwhile, the Bandaranaike International Airport said that fully vaccinated passengers with an endorsement of the airport health officer on their vaccination certificate are allowed to engage in duty-free shopping. However, unvaccinated passengers are not allowed to shop at the counters as they will be immediately directed to quarantine.
Jeevan Tyagaraja is to be appointed as the new governor of the Northern Province. He will replace current governor PMS Charles. Speaking to News First, Jeevan Tyagaraja said that he had submitted his resignation as a member of the Elections Commission. In more local news, Sri Lanka's High Commissioner to India, Milinda Moragoda, paid a courtesy call on the National Security Advisor of India, Shri Ajit Kumar Deve, in New Delhi today.
The Indian National Security Advisor and the Sri Lankan High Commissioner discussed a range of issues pertaining to the mutual strategic interest of the two countries. High Commissioner Moragoda also presented a copy of his policy road map named Integrated Country Strategy for Sri Lanka Diplomatic Missions in India for 2021 to 2023 to Ajit Doval.
The Taiwan Fashion Design Award 2021 successfully concluded at Taipei Fashion Week in Taipei. Ruanti Gajadira from Sri Lanka became the winner of the first prize for her work in sustainable collection and won a prize worth $10,000 at the awards.
Ruanti clinched the award out of nearly 450 designers from 18 countries and regions, including Europe, America and Asia. Ruanti Gajadira, a highly enthusiastic fashion designer who studied at Ladies College Colombo and AOD with a passion for perfecting Sri Lankan heritage crafts such as handloom, bobbin lace and natural dyes to produce innovative and sustainable textiles and garments. Ruanti is also the first South Asian to represent and win the Taiwan Fashion Design Award.
So the Cali collection, it's a sustainable collection and it speaks about Sri Lankan heritage crafts. I think this collection will show a brand new avenue for Sri Lankan fashion and craft and how we look at craft and how we can present our heritage craft into this. So opens new economical avenues which will help us to gain more income.
The Taiwan Fashion Design, launched in 1987 as a local contest, marked its 35th edition this year. Hosted by the Industrial Development Bureau, Ministry of Economic Affairs and organized by the Taiwan Textile Federation, it is the first official fashion competition in Asia.
And some news from overseas now. The US Senate has voted to temporarily raise the nation's debt limit, avoiding a historic default that experts say would have devastated the economy.
Senators agreed to increase the limit by $480 billion, which will cover the US until early December. The bill was approved in a 50-48 vote following weeks of partisan fighting.
What is the US debt ceiling?
The US government spends more money than it collects in taxes, so it borrows to make up for the shortfall. Borrowing is done by the US Treasury through the issuing of bonds. The US government bonds are seen as among the world's safest and most reliable investments. In 1939, Congress established an aggregate limit, also known as ceiling, on how much debt the government could accumulate. The ceiling has been lifted on more than 100 occasions to allow the government to borrow more. The Congress often acts on it in a bipartisan manner, and it is rarely the subject of a political standoff. This breakthrough came less than 2 weeks before the US was said to be unable to borrow money or pay off loans for the first time ever. The bill now has to be approved by the House of Representatives and will be then sent to the President, Joe Biden, to be signed into law. The vote in the upper house of Congress came after Republican Senate leader Mitchell McConnell offered his support for a short-term extension.
And some news from neighboring India. More than half of India's 135 coal-fired power plants are running on fumes as coal stocks run critically low in the country. Indian media has raised concerns that this threatens to derail India's post-pandemic economic recovery, as 70% of the electricity in India is generated using coal.
As India's economy picked up after a deadly second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, demand for power rose sharply. Power consumption in the last 2 months alone jumped by almost 17% compared to the same period in 2019. At the same time, global coal prices increased by 40% and India's imports fell to a 2-year low. India is the second largest importer, consumer and producer of coal and has the world's 4th largest reserves. It mainly imports from Indonesia, Australia and South Africa. Power plants that usually rely on imports are now heavily dependent on Indian coal, adding further pressure to already stretched domestic supplies. India's Power Minister R.K. Singh, speaking to foreign media, said the situation is touch and go and that the country should brace itself for the next 5 to 6 months. Meanwhile, Beijing has reportedly ordered China's coal mines to boost output as an energy shortage across the country has seen millions of homes and businesses hit by power cuts in recent weeks. Chinese media said 3 major coal-producing provinces have pledged to increase production. Several provinces across the country have been suffering from blackouts since the middle of last month. Demand for electricity is soaring as country emerges from lockdowns.
Shihan H.M. Sisirakumara Karate and the president of the South Asian Karate Do Federation has won a Japanese award. The award, titled Rising Sun Gold and Silver Rays, was presented to Shihan H.M. Sisirakumara by Japanese ambassador to Sri Lanka, Akira Sugiyama. And with that, we move on to some tragic news that was reported from right here in Sri Lanka, in Ragala. 5 people of the same family lost their lives in a fire that erupted inside their own residence in the Ragala estate.
Following the blaze that engulfed the household, the Newsfirst team that visited Ragala was only able to find this canine outside the now demolished household.
As you can see, the forensics investigation is currently underway and the cause for this fire is yet to be ascertained. Investigations revealed that the victims who fell prey to this horrific tragedy was a small boy who had just celebrated his first birthday, his 11-year-old brother, their mother and her parents.
The youngest son of the family, Mohan, celebrated his birthday inside the residence last night. However, the happiness of this family did not
last long. The neighbors have seen the flames bursting out from the house at about 10 last night. However, their efforts to douse the fire were not successful. The young Mohan Niroshan, who celebrated his very first birthday, his 11-year-old brother, their mother and her parents lost their lives in the fire. I came home after the birthday party. I heard the cry of an infant at about 10:15 last night. I came out after I heard the cry. When I came outside, I saw the flames were bursting out of the roofing sheets. This was the manner in which Mohan's uncle had collapsed outside the house at the time of the fire. According to our correspondent, he, who was under the influence of alcohol at the time, denied any knowledge of the incident. It is also reported that Mohan's father has been living separately and that he was not at home at the time of this tragedy. However, police said that he has visited the house that same evening.
And that's a wrap of primetime news on TV1 for tonight. But before we go, we'll leave you tonight with some of the views expressed by Samagya Jana Balawege parliamentarian Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca in Parliament today. Take care and God bless.
තමුන්නාසෙලා කියනවා අපි කොරෝනාවෙන් ගන්නවා කියලා ආතල්. හැබැයි අපි දැක්ක තමුන්නාසෙලා නම් පාස්කු ප්‍රහාරයෙන් පුදුම ආතල් එකක් ගත්තේ.
You are claiming that we are taking advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. But we saw how you took advantage of the April 21st attacks. We have noticed that they have started talking about terrorism once again to scare the public and to secure their control over the public. Venerable Gnanasaratero spoke to the media about terrorism recently. With all due respect, I would kindly request them to avoid destroying our country.
මහජන ආරක්ෂක ඇමති පිස්සෙක් වගේ දොඩවනවා. තමුන්නාසෙලාට ඊට වඩා
Can't you find anyone better for that post? Give it to someone like Dayasiri Jayasekara, or at least you can take over. He is also following the footsteps of Venerable Gnanasaratero by making silly statements. You are allocating an additional 1 billion for the teachers from this year's budget. Although you allocated that billion, you barely even spent 5,000 rupees on that.
ඒකෙන් තමුන්නාසෙලාට රුපියල් 5000ක් දෙන්න බෑ. මෝරෙක් ඔය කෑ ගහන්න එපා. අහගන්න. තමුන්නාසෙ ඉස්කෝලේ ගියාද? ඉස්කෝලේවත් ගිහිල්ලා නැති එකෙක් මෙතන කෑ ගහනවා. මානව හිමික මෙයා යනවා පුෂ්පිකා එක්ක. මේවා නවත්තන්න මේවා තමුන්නාසෙලාගේ රජයට හොඳ නෑ. අපේ රටේ ගෞරවයට අභිමානයට හොඳ නෑ. ඔයත් අරගෙන යන්න කොහේ හරි ඉන්න එකේ පුළුවන් නම් කොහේ හරි